The inaugural BWR Arizona was a raucous, rowdy affair. I had the chance to test an Arizona gravel bike here in the desert, the Pivot Vault. The notable feature, of course, being the IsoFlex. It looks like a dropper post. It's not, although you can run a dropper post. It is an elastomer encased post that takes a bit of the edge off these rough roads that the mischievous mind of Michael Martz put us on for the inaugural BWR Arizona. I want to tell you about this bike. I want to tell you about the opportunity I had to go and visit Pivot, which is just down the road, run by Chris Cocalis, a man who's been designing, engineering, building bikes for decades and doing a great job of it. And I want to tell you about the days that led up to this, including myself and my Fast Cat coaching boss, Frank Overton, leading the shakeout ride. But first, I gotta go check out my hotel. We've got a noon checkout. We've got a few minutes here, so I'm gonna go clean myself up. You take a second, hit that subscribe button. We'll meet back here and we'll talk gravel bikes and BWR Arizona. And we're back. Got freshened up, got the finisher's trophy. BWR does the trophies right. Like the race course, a little on the stiff side. This bad boy's 8.5%. So we are here in the wash, which is the final kick in the teeth for the Wafer and the Wafer and the Waffle. Can't even speak straight at this point. You know you've Belgian waffled when you're not speaking straight at the end of the event. So just when you are meters from the finish, you're diverted into this deep sand wash. It's only a couple hundred meters, but if you're already wearing the poopy pants, feeling grumpy about things, this isn't going to help. We've seen a few people tip over as they run out of steam or cramp or all the above. Keegan Swinson and his partner, Sofia Gomez Villafane, took the respective wins. Christopher Blevins, world short track champion, came in just ahead of Keegan into the wash. Keegan came around to take the W.
Who led coming into the wash there?
I did.
Yeah? And
then
was a bit of a bobble, or what happened?
I just couldn't put power down. I think that's where, you know, gravel racing is so interesting. Like, I think, you know, Keegan was riding it really well. I think I was riding it really well, and he had a little wider tires, maybe a little lower pressure, and I think that made the difference in the end.
Just a matter of feet after 122 miles. How'd you feel out there, Keegan? Nice work. Congrats on the win.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a good one. Yeah, Chris and I had a pretty epic last 10 miles. Just pretty much attacking every of those climbs to that last neighborhood. And yeah, he had me a few times and we slowly brought him back, and a lot of cat and mouse, but awesome day.
So let's talk about the course a bit, and we'll talk about the bike, and then talk about Pivot itself. Belgian Waffle Ride, the original, of course, is in San Diego. That one draws 4,000 plus riders. Michael Marks, the mystic, manic mastermind behind this mayhem, describes his races now as unroad, not gravel, but unroad. And I gotta say that they are not like your typical gravel race, if there is such a thing as a typical gravel race, in that a steamboat or an unbound, the surface is fairly consistent throughout. Here you're either on baby butt smooth pavement, flying along in a big group, or you're on chunky, mud-laden whoops, the likes of which we saw numerous motocross riders out there riding, because that is their terrain. So what bicycle do you pick for such an adventure? Most, you know, the tire question is always a big thing. I saw Keegan was on slicks a couple days ago. I thought, bold choice, but if anybody can pull it off, he can. I asked him about that at the finish. Here's what he had to say.
I thought you had slicks on earlier. Is that a last minute change, or?
Yeah, I changed my mind last night.
Yeah.
Decided better to play it safe.
Yeah.
So I did the Wafer today, the 80-mile venue, which was good and plenty. You know, we got to tackle a lot of the hairy bits. And one thing I love about gravel is you can get in where you fit in, right? You can pick whatever distance you like. It's not like the fast kids get to do the long one and then it goes down from there. If you want to go big, you can go big. If you want to do the 35-mile wanna, have at it. And often the courses will overlap, so you're riding together. So at a few points today, it was mixed in with waffle riders. It was good to catch up with folks and share pulls as we rotated through. So is this gnarly mix of stuff fun or not? The answer is yes. Depends on who you ask. I was talking to a few riders in the hotel who said they were scared at points, and I too certainly felt this way, especially on the first dirt descent. I was wishing I had seen that ahead of time.
Yeah, go. Yeah, go.
Speaking of, a couple days ago we did the Fast Cat Shakeout ride. I work part-time at Fast Cat for my buddy Frank Overton, and we led a Fast Cat Shakeout ride on Saturday, day before the event, where we took in part of the course. You know, the pros often will get out and scout almost all the sections, at least the technical bits, and for good reason. Like when you're coming in hot behind a bunch of people, dust is being kicked up, it's better if you've seen it before. That's certainly not realistic for many of us, but we try to get out and see at least part of it. The day before is a good way to open up the legs too, so certainly enjoyed doing that with the Fast Cat gang. Okay, let's talk bike. Pivot Vault. This first came out in 2019, I want to say, tweaked in 2020. The IsoFlex is the story here. There's certainly a lot of geometry bits, we'll get into that, but the IsoFlex basically means you've got some give in the seat post. I was talking to a rider, Jim Scheel from Colorado, who's got the new Specialized STR suspended rider S-Works bike, and I was telling Jim that this feels similar to that STR on the middle setting. There's 3 different settings on that full suspension gravel bike, and this feels like the middle setting, maybe between the first and second setting, and that it takes the edge off. It's not like bobbing and weaving all over the place, and I didn't feel much lateral movement, but certainly it was welcome to have a bit of comfort. Also, you can put a dropper post on here, and doing the shakeout ride, I absolutely would have used a dropper post.
Somebody send a dropper. Stat.
There was parts that were so steep, I was, all the way back, stomach on the saddle, rear wheel locked up, front wheel about to lock up, and would certainly have appreciated having a dropper. And often my take on dropper posts is that, yeah, they work well in those situations, but then they compromise the feel of the bike, right? Like, often just having a longer than this 27.2 carbon post for me is a good amount of flex. Something like the VCLS post that comes on many of the Canyon bikes, that's got a nice amount of give, and if you put a dropper on there, that is a rigid thing, so you're kind of sacrificing the feel. So here with this Pivot Vault, you can have your cake and eat it too. In terms of geo, I'm on a size large here, which has got basically like a 57 top tube, not super long. I spoke to Chris Cocalis about that, and he was saying like a little progressive is fine, but too much is too much. Good middle of the road bicycle politics. The front end is a 72. That's certainly on the steeper end for gravel bikes. I didn't feel like it was overly squirrely, but then again, I tend towards a racier, like a road racier feeling gravel bike, so I liked how that felt. Bike also has Dura-Ace, Duraci 12 speed. I love the feel of this, especially in the hand, a little bit of how it curves inwards. I love how the buttons drive my Garmin. You can change pages while keeping your arms and hands inside the ride, which is a good thing to do in gravel. And you can toggle between the map page and whatever other data dorkery pages you want to look at. I love a 2x, and better believe I was in all the gears at some point, climbing up some of the steeps in the smallest gear, and then also, using the 50, this is a 50-34, using the 50-11 at many points on the road. At some point I did get chain suck going, like one of the many sharp down, sharp up transitions, went big ring to small ring, and the chain got sucked up in between the ring and the chainstay. I had to climb off and pull the chain out. Apologies to the riders I jammed up behind me. It was cool. I've never ridden a high-end gravel bike with Dura-Ace 12 speed. I guess I love everything about it. Certainly the feel up here, the shifting, the gear options. What I would have preferred, it doesn't exist yet, but is a clutch rear derailleur a la GRX. So GRX is 11 speed. We may see GRX 12 speed down the line. Who knows what's in the future there. I like the narrower Q factor of the road cranks compared to a slightly wider stance of GRX. Out back, we've got 420 chainstays, which are pretty short. Both the drive side and the non-drive are dropped. We often see a lower drive side chainstay. Seldom see the non-drive dropped. The idea is to get a relatively tidy 420 chainstay and still have clearance for a 45 mil tire and clearance for crank mounted power meters like Stages or 4Eyes. Speaking of, if I had known the bike was going to have Dura Ace crank on it, I would have brought a Stages meter. Brought the SRM X Power pedals just because I'm a dork and I like to have power, because if you don't have data, how would you know whether you're having fun or not? So I like having power on bikes, and that's why I brought these, but they're fussy, man. They're super fussy. From trying to charge the pedals, I was unable to do that in the hotel room after doing one ride, and they got a little dirty, so I got a little Clorox wipe and cleaned them up as the best I could and tried again, and it just wouldn't work. So that's not a user-friendly scenario. The power, like when they're working, the power is good, and they're shorter than the rallies, which is why I prefer them. But yeah, they're just fussy. And then today, a couple times I went to unclip and there was just like a bit of hesitation as I was coming out, and that they were clinging on a little more than SPD. So my preference and my recommendation to you is, if you want a power meter for gravel, which of course you need data, put it somewhere else besides the pedal. SRAM makes a great option, or Quark I should say, which is a SRAM brand, makes a great option. Highly recommend that. If you're a Shimano person, I highly recommend Stages. You can do left, right, or both sides. And then 4Eyes has a similar configuration. So that's my story about power and pedals. Other little bits and bobs. A Pivot branded WTB saddle has a bit of squish. This course was so rowdy, I was happy to have that. What I regret not bringing, bento box for snacks. I just went with the pockets. Belgian Waffle Ride is great about having multiple aid stations along the way. Lots of folks out there volunteering, holding out, not beers necessarily, although I saw a few of those. I think even the Pivot gang was out there holding out beers, but holding out multiple, water bottles.
Yes, please, right on, thank you, sir.
And the gel, snacks, etc. So you don't have to pack all this stuff, but if you're racing, it's good to have snacks with you. So I should have done that. I had that laid out by the suitcase and decided against it, so shame on me. So for the Wafer, I believe I ended up third. That's what my man on the mic, Dave Toll, was saying. So go check in, see if there's a podium for that. Again, what I to beat this dead horse, it's so cool in gravel events, and that everybody's so mixed in together. You don't necessarily know where you are in the race unless you are Keegan or Sophia, who are leading the races, and that's okay. You can still go hard, ride with whoever you're with, like a big giant group ride on a crazy course that happens to be super well supported. The tire question. Maxxis Ramblers is what my man Pat at Pivot, who loaned me this bicycle, recommended. I was leaning towards something with a little less tread and was happy to have all the tread. Keegan was on 45s, and if Keegan's on 45s, the rest of us probably should be too. Yeah, Hannah. Good times, good times. Chris Cocalis at Pivot was the founder of Titus, the titanium mountain bike brand back in the day. He's been designing all sorts of bikes, from the big picture to the small picture. He was the guy that created BB 386 Evo, which is the bottom bracket standard here. He is an ardent defender of the press fit bottom bracket, saying that it's not the design that is the problem, it's the execution of the design. For those who say, but press fits, they just squeak all the time. So he is a big believer in very tight tolerances. One of the many tools in the shop there in Tempe is a go, no-go device, which the difference between go and no-go is less than the width of a human hair, if you can believe that.
Hi, I'm Chris Cocalis. I'm the CEO of Pivot Cycles. This is a go, no-go gauge, so bottom bracket, head tube, basically any of the key tolerance areas. The go gauge has to slide into the frame, and the no-go gauge cannot slide into the frame. And they're about the difference in size from the thickness of a human hair between the go and the no-go gauge. So we don't generally let the factories make the tooling or check gauges for us on this sort of thing, because they won't hold those type of tolerances. So it's up to us to make sure that basically we're holding pivot quality on everything. And so everybody's got the same gauges, working off the same tools and the same checklist. So this is our history wall. It's basically every new model of significance each year, so kind of the big hits of each year, but then the other models we released in those years are still listed. So in 2019 is when we introduced the first Vault, and then we had a major update to it in 2020 as well, which is the current bike. I think when we launched Pivot, we were both Pivot and BH bikes.
Yeah. And
BH was a partner in Pivot, helped us financially launch Pivot, and they really wanted BH bikes to be in the USA. They had no success up to that point. So we launched two companies, Pivot Cycles and BH USA, and then we shortly thereafter took over all the product development of the high-end BH Road product. So 2019 Tour de France, we launched, I think it was the G5. So it was a really good year for us with the first full BH bike that we had designed here with that launch, and then developing the triathlon bikes, the gravel bikes. And so at some point, I forget what year, it was probably 7 years ago, the owner of BH Bikes, Jose Luis Bistegui, was going to retire, and he wanted to leave the bicycle company and his fitness company to his children, but he did not want to have partnerships. And he made us a really nice offer to purchase BH USA entirely. And so they moved it to their BH Fitness division in California. And then we were just Pivot after that point. But the last project that I worked on was a new gravel bike for BH, and one of our kind of parting gifts to each other was that we shared those molds. They were still hell-bent on wanting cantilever studs on everything, and I was quickly moving towards disc brakes. And so we had different sets of chainstay molds and things so that we had some separation in the models. But that next year is when Pivot launched the Vault, and they launched, I forget, the RX something or other that was still kind of a mixed cyclocross gravel bike with cantilever studs. So we kind of carried on those till the next generation, in which we designed an all-new bicycle. So this is the extra small E-Vault. Pretty much identical geometry to the regular Vault, and then has the Fazua motor system, removable battery on it. These are pretty cool because they're class 3, so they're 28-mile-per-hour bikes. The cool thing about this bike is the motor and battery completely disengages from the frame. So there's a plastic cover you can get for the down tube, and you can ride it just like a regular Vault, completely muscle bike, as the Germans would say, or acoustic, analog, whatever the term you want to use for non-e-bike, but there's no drag on the system. So really you just, without the battery and motor in, you're dealing with about a 1 pound penalty compared to a regular Vault. Makes it really nice for your everyday bike. And then if you've got some bigger climbs or a recovery day, or you just like to have power all the time.
Tell me what you make in here.
We make pretty much everything in here. So we'll start with making carbon tubes for prototypes and aluminum lugs. And then we'll put all that stuff together, and we'll be able to change those lugs pretty quickly, basically being able to build a prototype within 3 to 4 weeks. And then if we need to change that prototype, we can make another set of aluminum lugs and fixtures pretty quickly to adjust geometry. On the suspension side, anything with kinematics, we can just make a lot of adjustments really quickly. It takes about half the time now than it used to take with the aluminum frames. And then we can also tune the carbon layup identically to what we're going to use in a production bike. So with the aluminum lugs, you get about a 1/2 to 3/4 of a pound increase in the overall frame weight, but we can still get the ride tuning and the quality of the feel of the bike similar. We also do all the high-tech check tooling here, so final fixture checking gauges, things like handlebar stems, linkages, dropouts, really anything that's going to be forged in the future will start here, and oftentimes even injection molded plastic pieces like covers, clamps. We'll make the tooling. We'll actually do some prototypes of pour molded parts to get it like it's going to be the final injection part, and then before we open any kind of production tooling, we'll have proven it all out here.
So all your designs get created, finalized here.
Yes.
Sent to factory, built there, sent back here, and tested with your very rigorous half a human hair with tolerances.
Half a human hair with tolerances, yeah.
Yes.
Molded frames in Asia, we have these foam inner cores and silicone mandrels that we use. This whole part gets basically taped together, and then we do the entire layup on the structure. And that structure goes inside the molds, stays with the frame the entire time. The foam pieces actually melt inside the airbags, and we're able to pull them out. And then we're able to pull out these silicone pieces and reuse them in production. But the time it takes to make, even in prototype form, all of these silicone pieces and replacements for the foam parts was months and months. You can see some of the prototype parts done here versus the production pieces. Like this was a layup piece that's water soluble. We didn't actually get to testing that, but the idea was that we could 3D print different materials and then build the bike on that. But the process is long and kind of exhaustive to get that done. So being able to make specific tubes and then use the lugs is just infinitely quicker. Our proprietary IsoFlex system is basically a system designed to completely isolate the seat post from the frame. So you're not actually getting suspension travel, but the impacts from the road, the bumps, are not making it fully through to your seat because it's isolated fully in rubber. So the seat post isn't touching the frame anywhere. The frame is actually holding this rubber part in, and then it's kind of like a clamp-on handle grip actually. And then it's a lock ring holds it separately into the frame, and the kind of the teardrop shape keeps it from twisting. It's pretty incredible how it allows the impact from reaching the rider, but also it allows us to make a more racy frame. So stiffness wise and the way your power transfer is on the bike, it really feels a lot more like a pro road race frame. And when you start building a ton of flex into the seat stays, you just start to lose stiffness in other areas in the bottom bracket, and basically some of your performance stiffness numbers start to degrade a little bit. With this, we can kind of find a better balance where we can get the rider comfortable on the bike and then have the frame be a little bit higher performance as well. This was the development of IsoFlex and the idea of, like, if these seat stays get too thin or drop too far down and you really start to build a lot of vertical compliance or too much flex into the back end of the bike, you can't also control the torsional stiffness. So when you put power down on your pedals and you're leaning into the bike and putting your power down, having that back end of the bike wrap up badly, we really wanted to keep good road bike stiffness out of the bike and have some compliance, but not go over that edge. And so the amount of time that was spent on the IsoFlex, I don't remember how many different iterations were till we got this to work, and the right durometers and actually the right fit between the frame molding and the seat post going in and fitting snugly. That was about 1.5 years of prototypes and development just on that part of the bike. So, and then just to have world-class tire clearance, lightweight, all the key things that you'd want in a modern cutting-edge bike. On a gravel bike, most companies were basically using for Di2 the battery inside the seat post, but we have to accommodate dropper posts. So we have a port at the bottom of the down tube on this one, and then it's got a holder for the Di2 battery going horizontally up into the down tube.
Price-wise, this ain't cheap. This bad boy with Dura-Ace 12 speed and Reynolds wheels that are stickered up as Pivot, just shy of 10 grand. You can get complete bikes starting at $6,500 and going up from there. So like many high-end bicycles these days, they're not cheap things, but boy, are they fun to ride. So bottom line, BWR Arizona. 2 cactus scratched thumbs up. Pivot vaults, similar. I really enjoyed it. Like the BB at like, I think it's 70 mil. Drop is low enough to feel stable, but not so low that I'm clipping pedals. And this IsoFlex thing, it works well, and it's what I think good gravel suspension should be. And it takes a bit of the edge off, but it doesn't add a bunch of weird complexity. Yeah, it looks a little chunky, but you can still use any 27.2 post you like, including a dropper post. So a lot of versatility there. So that's it for me. I'm going to finish this, take a nap in the wash, and I will see you guys at the Mid-South next week in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and you know what to do. Enjoy the ride. I'm gonna end up asleep in this wash here if I finish this whole thing.